ever BIA from the Ville, Bryce
I'd like to thank God for just giving me the talent to be out here with y'all boys and just helping me just prosper, to be the best man I am every day. Shout out Coach Water and BIA for helping me develop and get better every day. Shout out Zone 6 for helping me get better every day. Shout out Coach Dave just for the opportunity to come play for the Buckeye. Shout out the Brotherhood. Go Bucks! Hey!
I'm a believer that this team's going to win the national championship. Something stupid is coming out of his mouth. I don't know. Maybe it's just my age. He needs his vote pulled immediately. And of course, yes, a season like this has to have a name. Let's talk about something good about Justin Frye. What are you doing? Season of dreams. Ohio State, my guys, are either the best or the second best program in the history of college football. This guy is a bonehead. They love him. I question your judgment as an adult. I really do. I was a total hater. I know that for a fact, and I just don't get it. Get us back our sleeves and say, bring me that. That's the one I want. There I am. Good morning, everybody. How are you? Welcome into Juck on Bucks on a Thursday. Boy, this week is flying by. Appreciate you all so much for joining me. And shout out to my man Bryce West out of the Ville up here in Northeast Ohio, one of our Cleveland boys, and we do love our Glenville kids down at Ohio State. So shout out to him for getting his black stripe removed. And we got a lot to get through today. Chock full show. I got a big apology to make from yesterday's show, and I'll be making that apology in a little bit. We got a lot of fake outrage to go over today. I love outrage, but fake outrage is my favorite. A lot of fake outrage over the Georgia Bulldogs and their ranking in the college football playoff, as well as BYU. Has Michigan made a big mistake in their all-out pursuit of Bryce Underwood? If they don't get him, they sure have. What is Ohio State's toughest matchup in this playoff? Who do you least want to see? Is there anybody that you want to see? I got one that I really want to see. And we got some big movement yesterday in the recruiting landscape, and we'll start there. Five-star wide receiver Caleb Cunningham, top 20 kid in the country from Mississippi, longtime Ole Miss lean before he committed to Alabama. And that was in the midst of Alabama's big momentum swing in this recruiting class that eventually took over the Ohio State recruiting class for the number one class. And it was in the middle of me coming to terms with the fact that Alabama recruiting was not, in fact, going to fall back to the 6 to 10 range nationally when Kalen DeBoer took over, which was a very tough pill for me to swallow because I spent the first 2 months of Kalen DeBoer's tenure criticizing everything he did, everybody he hired, including getting rid of Sam Petiti, who is now working at Ohio State under Mark Pantoni. Big win for the good guys, by the way. Love that guy. He also brought in Courtney Morgan, his recruiting director from Washington, when they recruited in the 30s together up at Washington. But that Cunningham commitment was when I admitted to myself that I was wrong. They weren't going to drop off. They were going to continue to excel. Well, Cunningham has decommitted, decided to stay home and play for Ole Miss. They don't even recruit in the top 15, so that's great news. And Caleb Cunningham wants to be the Ryan Williams of Ole Miss. He wants to play for his home state where everybody loves him. Ryan Williams from Alabama, and he thinks he can do the same thing at Ole Miss. More power to him. Go be the Ryan Williams at Ole Miss. What has he done for us? Well, it means for us, my friends, that with exactly 3 weeks left till signing day, Ohio State has retaken the number one class in the 247 composite. Boom. Buckeyes back on top with 3 weeks left. Now, we're still going to need a couple things to swing in our favor. It's still maybe a bit of a long shot. Georgia nipping at the heels. They got some dudes who are probably heading their way, but we won't know till the 4th of December. Nonetheless, 3 weeks away, Bucks back on top, and I am thrilled by it as we chase our very first number one recruiting class. And right now, sitting on top. I love it. How we doing it today in the chat here, fellas? What's going on? Doreen, how we doing, Brad? Good to see you guys. Thanks for joining me this morning. What's up, Ken? Anyway, guys, the most prevalent fan base in here, obviously, Ohio State, about 95%. But we do have a couple percentage points spread out. And when those college football rankings came out, the Michigan fan base, they're number 2. They didn't have anything to worry about, nor did the Oregon fan base. We all knew they were going to be number 1. But the number 4 fan base that watches this show per the demographic breakdown from the cities, the Georgia Bulldogs, 5th is Texas, if you were wondering. So shout out to the Horns. Sorry for crapping on your resume. But how about those dogs? I was a little irritated about those rankings when they came out, just a little bit. Not anything big, but there are a lot of people who are pretending to be extremely irritated about those playoff rankings for a playoff that isn't happening for quite a while yet. And I thought that Penn State being in front of Indiana, just like last week, was silly. It's still silly. Their resumes are pretty similar. Penn State, the best thing on their resume is a loss to Ohio State. They've notched nothing but easy wins, same as Indiana. I don't think Penn State's a true threat to win the national championship. I also don't think Indiana is either, and the fact that they're 4-5, one spot apart, whatever. What bugged me a little more was SMU and Miami. They play in the same conference. They both have one loss. Miami's big win, ranked Louisville. SMU's big win, ranked Louisville. And also Pitt by 30. So pretty comparable resumes, but Miami somehow ranked 5 spots ahead of them. Does it make sense? I don't think so. They asked Ward Manuel, and he basically said, because we think Miami's playing better. And to me, that's an issue because the committee wants it both ways. They either want the easy explained answer, which is this team just has more losses, so it's nice and easy, or they basically just shrug their shoulders and say we do what we want. I think that's going to be an issue moving forward until there's a set criteria or guidelines that say how you should judge these teams. But the guideline of just the best teams, it just doesn't work. Everybody's got a different criteria for that, and it leads to nothing but stupid debates, which I can't stand, or I love, depending on the day. But a lot of people really furious, particularly over Georgia, who currently at number 12 is on the outside looking in, if it were to end today. Of course, it doesn't end today. Now, since the prevalence of the internet, maybe a top 10 thing that I've gained from it, because I spend so much time in college football media, consuming, not in it, but just over the last 10 years, is finding different ways to, different shows, different ways to get my college football news. And because of that, I probably stopped watching anything on ESPN outside of games like a decade ago. It's made my life infinitely better. Probably yours too, as you're watching my show here from Juckeye Studios and not ESPN. So I don't catch much ESPN. Yesterday was no exception, but I did see a clip floating around all over the place of Paul Feinbaum and Mike Greenberg and Heather Dinich, and I'll spare you having to listen to it again because I'm sure many of you probably saw it. But to summarize basically what they were saying in the most hyper, overperformed, fake outrage thing I've ever seen is that Georgia, at number 12 on the outside looking in, had beaten Texas like a drum head-to-head, and Texas was ranked number 3. Texas, of course, had a great season so far, but they've also not played anybody and got beat by Georgia. Georgia with the 2 losses. The Ole Miss loss, which was embarrassing. The Alabama loss, which I feel was equally embarrassing, even though they were able to come back in the end. This Texas team, though, it is really propped up. It's propped up off a Michigan win that we thought was going to be at the time an 8-win, 9-win Michigan team. They're clearly not. And Texas looked very dominant over them. And ever since then, I think they've been a little artificially propped up. And Chris and I talked about it in our last show. We both felt a little brainwashed by it. But even as I saw it happening to myself, I still had them ranked 3 because I didn't know who else to put there at 3. I don't feel Penn State deserves it. I don't feel Indiana deserves it. I don't know what to do with it. But Georgia currently would be out of the playoffs and Texas would be number 3. So if the mission is to get the better team, then in their opinion, Georgia should be at number 3 and not Texas. But we aren't comparing Georgia and Texas because they're not really in the same tier. You go to head-to-head when you're in the same tier. Georgia's not there. They've lost 2 games, but it's not just because they've lost 2 games. They've lost 2 games in embarrassing fashion and more. Not only have they lost 2 games in embarrassing fashion, their wins have been terrible. You look at Ole Miss. They were in a game very late. They ended up winning by 10. Kentucky, 1 point. Those are 2 teams that are terrible in the SEC. The first half of the Clemson game, which they ended up blowing Clemson out, but it was terrible. Now, I value big wins more than I penalize losses. I think that that's something, and there's been a big push for that. It's something I feel that we should do. And the reason I feel we should do it is because I want to incentivize teams scheduling big-time games in the out-of-conference early in the season so that we as college football fans get to watch those games for those first 3 weeks of the season that otherwise would be filled with crap. If we continue to go down an avenue where we just value 10-0, 11-0, 12-0, and we don't care, like if we put so much value on, all right, this team has 2 losses, they can never be over a 1-loss team, then it's just going to dilute the schedule. It's going to dilute the product for us in the beginning of the season, and I don't want that. And people have been saying, well, if you penalize Georgia with 2 losses, then that Clemson game is not going to continue to happen. That Clemson out-of-conference game that they scheduled in the beginning of the season. I would argue that Clemson game is the only thing that's going to save them. If they beat Tennessee this weekend, they're in. There's no doubt about that. Top 10 Tennessee, that gives them 3 great wins. Let's pull up their schedule here. So we know about their 2 losses. If they go beat Tennessee, they've now got wins against Texas, Clemson, and Tennessee, with 2 really nice looking losses record-wise, Alabama at 10-2, Ole Miss at 10-2. And that looks great. That's a playoff resume for sure. But if you take Clemson out of there, what are you looking at now? You're looking at a team that had 2 miserable losses to 2 good teams and 2 good wins. Not really a playoff roster to me when you're looking at these other teams. So that Clemson win actually is going to save them. It's going to save their hide. And scheduling it made all the difference for them. So I don't know, guys. Curious to know what your thought is on the whole Georgia deal. I just do find the fake outrage to be so obnoxious when we all know that they're playing Tennessee this Saturday, which is really going to decide their season. If they win, they're in. But there's been a whole lot of the SEC outrage stuff going on this week. And I heard some people irritated that BYU was ranked at number 6. And the reasoning for that was that every one of the SEC teams would be favored over BYU by a touchdown. And I agree. And my response to agreeing is, so what? That's what the playoffs are for, right? We don't need to pretend like we don't all recognize that. We get that. And as long as we're going to include the Big 12 champion, it's going to be like that. The Big 12 champion is never going to be a team that comes out and we say, maybe once in a blue moon, that we say is going to compete with everybody in our thoughts and minds and how we would set the game and power rate it and set the lines. Like, it's never going to be like that. But if you're going to include them, until you make the Big Ten or the SEC Invitational, you have to seed them based on their resume, because we just don't know. We can think all we want, and like I said, that's what the playoffs for. We get to see, what do you got? After a couple years, I imagine, if the champion of the Big 12 comes in and gets crushed in their first games, things might change at that point. But for now, all we got to go on is their record, how they've played, who they've beat, and them being seeded 6, I don't really have a problem with. Now, they get beat by 40. Next year, Oklahoma State wins. They get beat by 40. We're talking a different story. But as long as you include them, and again, I don't really care if you do or don't. You can make this a Big Ten SEC Invitational Championship. I'm fine with it. But if you're going to include them, you got to be fair. There has to be some level of deserve in this, right? And if you win all your games, you certainly deserve it. The Big 12 already being appropriately penalized, they're only going to get 1 team in. Their second-tier team isn't going to be in. The runner-up won't be in the ACC most likely either. So, they're already being appropriately punished as far as that goes. But we got a Buckeye commit in the headlines. And let's get to my favorite position, linebacker. Well, my former favorite position, linebacker, before linebackers became 6'2", 205 pounds and started covering. It used to be my favorite position back in the Anthony Schlegel type of linebacker days. But TJ Alford, man. TJ Alford, the second guest ever on Juck on Bucks, a good friend of the show. James Laurinaitis' class of 2025 in the linebacker room is absolutely stellar, with 5-star Riley Pettijohn out of McKinney, Texas, an absolute burner. He will be the fastest linebacker that we've had at Ohio State since Ryan Shazier. Flies around, makes tackles. Got two younger brothers, really good football players as well. A potential Pettijohn pipeline sounds really good, right? Then we got top 100 overall prospect TJ Alford out of Vero Beach, Florida. Not quite as athletic, but very long, a tackling machine, bad intentions, a mean dude who absolutely idolizes James Laurinaitis, which kind of tells you a little bit about his mindset, right? So those two make up two of the top 10 linebackers in the country. Similar size, about 6'2", 210, 220. And then you got the first commit from right here in my hometown, Eli Lee from Hoban, a 3-star who's actually dropped in the rankings, almost down to outside the top 50 linebackers in the country since he signed with Ohio State, which we usually don't see. We usually see a Buckeye bump. He hasn't gotten that bump, even to have, despite having a really good senior season and performing very well at the Rivals camp and the Under Armour camp. Won the MVP at one of them, the one in Canton in the offseason. And when you see that kind of stuff, they're in their underwear. It's underwear Olympics. And when you think of a guy like, oh, he's just a classic throwback linebacker, 6'3", 230, who can't run too good. When you see him in the underwear Olympics and he's holding his own, that's generally when you see those guys get a bump. He didn't. But what's old is new again. And as college football starts getting back into the power run game, which they are, we're seeing the trend. And Eli Lee at 6'3", 230, those type of guys are going to be more valued. And I really like that he's going to, hey, listen, also, he's an Ohio kid, which, a lot of benefits to bringing in kids like that, much more than just the body type and the body style. But a pretty diverse group in these three guys that are coming in. And a position at Ohio State that I don't feel like we've had a superstar for quite a while. And if you said I got to bet $10 today on whether or not the next Ohio State linebacker superstar will be out of this class of 2025 or someone currently on the roster, I'd put my $10 on these dudes coming in. Now, we've talked a lot about the Ohio State defensive scheme this year, the re-engineering that they went through. They're definitely going through some changes, trying some new things. And one of the arguments a lot of people like myself and Chris have made, and we had a long discussion about this one day, there are special athletes out there, right? Special athletes in playing positions like a Viper, a Leo, a Jack, a Wolf, running different kinds of personnel packages. They attract these kind of special athletes, guys like Will Anderson at Alabama, just absolute game wreckers. It's a lot of fun. They get a lot of publicity when they're good at it. And those very special athletes are very attracted to that. And we can go back to the recruitment of Justin Hill, class of 2025, a dude who I think is incredibly special. He chose to go to Alabama to play their Wolf position in that defense. And if everybody can just remember back, let's cast aside the Jack discussion right now because of the 4 plays against Purdue. But just this summer, Hill was being recruited to Ohio State as the Jack. This is not something that they did not intend as a staff to embrace. They were going to play it. It just requires a special player, and the personnel right now, they didn't feel matched it. But they laid out a big plan to Justin Hill. They were going to use him as the Jack, defensive end, linebacker hybrid, went down to Winton Woods, Jim Knowles, James Laurinaitis, Tim Walton, Matt Guerreri, I believe. Or it was Tim Walton or Matt and Larry Johnson. 4 of the coaches gave him the whole spiel with his family. They couldn't show him proof of concept of the Jack because they'd not been playing it. But the reason they've not been playing it is because we don't got a Justin Hill. So they were totally bought in on doing this should he had committed, right? Because keep in mind, if Justin Hill commits to Ohio State and in 2024 you don't play the Jack, he's probably going to flip out. So this was always in the plans until he decommitted, or not decommitted, never committed to Alabama. In the final couple of weeks of that recruitment that was being led by Jim Knowles and James Laurinaitis, Larry Johnson wasn't really involved until that meeting down in Winton Woods. And then when Larry got brought in, just in the last couple of weeks, Justin wasn't interested in playing defensive end. And a couple of weeks before he made that decision, Larry Johnson started talking about making him the next Chase Young. And that's Larry's go-to close the deal move. Why wouldn't it be, right? That's a great move. But this kid didn't want to play defensive end. That's what they had not been discussing that. They wanted to use him in a different way, and he wanted to be used in a different way, which they had no proof of concept, just promises. And now he's getting different messages from different coaches. Add on to that the stepdad from Alabama, and you had a perfect storm to lose that kid from Ohio down to Alabama. Now, at the beginning of the season, were we going to play the Jack? Knowles said, we're not going to play the Jack this year. And you just got to wonder, like I said to myself at the time, what if Hill had committed? You got to think they're going to play it some. But it's interesting to think about. And I'm bringing this up today because we've been talking about the Jack this week as we played it against Purdue. And I just saw some comments yesterday from our guy, TJ Alford, who I reached out to this morning. Haven't heard back from yet. So we know that TJ was at Miami and Florida State. His dad is a huge Miami fan. Most of their family is too, but dad's not pushing him towards Miami. He does have a lot of family pushing him towards Miami, but it's extended family, cousins, aunts, uncles, not pops. He's also visited Illinois. Awesome, right? I kind of like a kid who's visited Illinois, Florida State officially, and Miami officially as well. He's really got a good relationship with Mike Norvell at Florida State, but I don't know, man. After the year they've had, hard to think that anybody's jumping on board over there. So 24/7 hits up TJ Alford, and they want some comments from him yesterday. And TJ says he's locked in with the Buckeyes, and his plan is to head there on the first day of class on January 6th before heading to the San Antonio Navy All-American game. Shout out TJ for being selected for that just the other day. But he also says that he's trying to make up his mind, or he's going to make up his mind before December 4th. And once his mind is made up, everybody else will find out. He also tweeted some things with the stupid eyeballs that the kids tweet when somebody mentions him by name on some Miami things. So some people a little concerned. What about TJ? Is he locked in? I think and have thought for a very long time that he's 100% in. And I think that because he really believes in James Laurinaitis and his ability to make him an NFL star, just like James. Looks up to him a ton. And we're going to continue to get that tremendous linebacker class every year we have James Laurinaitis because of that and because his personality is just so amazing. Just the dude in the room, no matter what room he's in. Everybody gravitates towards him. But TJ also quoted in this article with something that kind of pertains to this Jack discussion. He said, at Florida State, Illinois, Miami, I feel like they would use my athleticism more and allow me to show my skill set more than at Ohio State because they allow their linebackers to be more athletes than Ohio State does. And that right there is what Chris and I have been talking about. These very special players want to showcase their skills, man. They want to showcase their skills. And I know a lot of you saw what they did in those 4 plays and listened to Joel Klatt crap on it nonstop, intentionally, by the way, with the Jack. And this is not specific to the Jack, but it's adding these different things to the defense, multiplicity, not being so vanilla, that attracts dudes like Justin Hill, TJ Alford, these special athletes that can potentially be game wreckers. And Justin Hill, he's now at Alabama to go play their cool Wolf position and not at Ohio State to play their cool Jack position. So whatever the hell that means, I don't know. But I've got an apology to make. A comment that I saw yesterday after I was done with the show. And I'm very, very sorry. But I'm going to pull up a couple of these comments that I found from yesterday that were right around it. And for starters, my man Mike Green. So I was obviously praising Will Howard a lot yesterday in the show. And Mike Green said he should have at least 5 more touchdowns. And I totally agree, Mike. I totally agree. But I think we got to keep in mind that we're watching every Will Howard attempt. If we were watching every Dylan Gabriel attempt or every Cam Ward attempt, would we also be able to pick out 5 touchdowns that they left on the field? I would think so. And while I admit it's irritating, and I said so earlier this week, we look at that missed touchdown to Carnell Tate. That play there, I just feel like I feel like he's in his head at this point. If you stop it right before he throws it, it looks like he kind of loads it up a little different, almost like it's in his head. He tried so hard to just float it in there perfectly. A lot of people ragging on Will's arm strength as if he couldn't throw it further. He certainly could. That ball traveled 42 yards in the air. He can certainly throw it around 60 yards minimum. I know that for sure. because I can throw it 50 yards. Well, I could when I was his age, 50 yards, and I'm not 6'4", 230. I know he can. So it's not a weenie arm. All right, let's continue. Our buddy Rod. Where's Rod? Rod says, I'm so bad at not liking vids, I have to be reminded every time. Rod, please like the video. As a reminder, I was checking some demographics, and 41% of you guys watching are not subscribed to the show. And I would like to humbly ask you, if you are not commit adverse. I mean, I don't know. I'm not giving you what you need here. I think we've known each other long enough. Maybe it's time to hit that subscribe button, make the full commitment. 40%. That's a big number, man. That's a big number. And honestly, it kind of hurts my feelings that it's taking you this long. So let's hit that subscribe button, like the video, and that would be fantastic. Just 10% of you have the bell notification on. If you could hit that bell, if you really, really like the show, hit that bell. These kind of things assist, I'm told, in something called the algorithm, which sounds pretty cool. So if you could do that, that would be great. More importantly, it makes me feel better, helps me stay engaged and do a better job for you guys. So if you could, please do that. And we've got a couple more comments to go over. One from my friend Lisa. Lisa is excellent. She's here every morning. And she says she thinks we got a good shot against any of the playoff teams. And she would love to be sitting back with a drink and a snack and watch two SEC teams go at it and knocking one out. Could not agree more. And I think we are going to go over the Buckeyes, how they match up with each of the current playoff teams, and who we think is the most difficult matchup. I've got one that I think is a real tough one, and I've got one that I absolutely want. Also, one that I did not take a snapshot of, but how are we looking at with Naeem Offord? Five-star cornerback Naeem Offord out of Alabama. He's canceled his last two visits. As we know, he was going to come up for Iowa, was going to come up for Nebraska. And when I tweeted about them choosing not to come to Nebraska, his dad, who I've talked to before a couple of times, reached out to me within 10 minutes of that tweet to tell me that he was definitely coming to Michigan. Now, I'm not saying that because I'm saying that just because I think that he explained that Naeem's cousin was playing in the Magic City Bowl in Birmingham. And the fact that he reached out to some podunk little podcast to clarify the reason just kind of makes me think like maybe he cares what Buckeye fans think. It made the optimistic part of me, right? The part that wants to be optimistic think, all right, everything's all cool. Now, I could be wrong, but that's how I took it. So I feel pretty good. We know that he loves Tim Walton, right? Auburn every week is getting worse. I think that he definitely wants to play for a competitor. And even more importantly, he's a star. He wants the audience. When's the last time you saw Auburn in a big-time game? It's been a while, man. It's been a while. Who's the other threat? Oregon. Oregon's the biggest threat. Obviously, we know that Oregon just had newly minted five-star Brandon Finney, their second cornerback, with Dorian Brew flip out of the class. So with Dorian Finney gone, Auburn driving up the number, is Oregon going to match the number? I mean, I would think the answer is they're going full bore now to get that second corner, right? And at what point does it start looking silly financially with the Ohio State deal, which is not going to be in the same stratosphere if those two start banging at each other, driving up that number, right? But a lot of people say, you didn't sign David Sanders. Why don't you just up the number? You also got to factor in, for every upping of the number to Offord, that is times two, right? Because you can't justify compensating Offord more than Devin Sanchez. So, things get a little dicey there. It gets even more dicey. What about Aaron Scott? Aaron Scott was a five-star just last year, right? You can't pay Offord three times what you paid him. Now you got Aaron Scott transferring out of the program after you just spent a year developing him. Naeem's got big star power. He wants to be seen. That doesn't happen at Auburn. It can happen at Oregon. But Ohio State, with the city of Columbus, it helps a lot. At any rate, I think his best relationship is with Tim Walton. I don't think that's been a secret. And ultimately, I was feeling like this was a 50-50 coin flip. I feel better at this point. I really do. nonetheless, we've only got 3 weeks to sweat it out, man. We're almost here. It's almost over. So, what do you guys think? Is anybody feeling very negative about the odds of Offord? Do the comments from TJ Alford scare you? Let me know in the comments. We have got a super chat from my man DeMarcus Carter. Morning, Juck. What's the official sponsor of your gear again? Well, happy you asked, buddy. The official sponsor of Juck on Bucks gear is ColumbusApparelCo.com. And at Columbus Apparel Co., you can find a full line of Juck on Bucks merchandise, which they've designed and put together. I chose all the garments, the best of the best, nothing but the best for the Juck eyes. But you can also get your screen printing done there. Anything you want printed, embroidered, really easy process. People that really care. And I've done this a lot of times with the business that I'm in, the real business, and not the fun. This is the fun. Something's always wrong. Like something is always wrong when you get batches of shirts screen printed. These guys, they care. They'll make sure you get it done right. Spend the extra 10 minutes. Use the promo code. Oh, somebody who asked me this before. For Thanksgiving. Use the promo code for Black Friday, whatever the thing is. Juck20. Juck20 will get you 20% off on any of that Juck Eye or Juck on Bucks gear at ColumbusApparelCo.com. Woody says, can't blame Offord for going on paid vacations on weekends when you're the most popular guy in town. I mean, can you imagine, guys? I was once 18, and if you were going to pay me to go visit a college campus and be absolutely fawned over by co-eds and everybody else, treated like a king, and then I got to go watch a sweet football game? Hell, are you kidding me? Absolutely. Absolutely. No doubt. No doubt. Oh, Chad says the Juck Eyes shirts are super comfortable. Thank you, Chad. Appreciate you, buddy. Lisa Sims says, I don't care what Alford does as long as he doesn't come back here. You don't want Alford to come back here? This is a good question, man. I've seen some talk about this. Kevin Chavez says Will Howard is getting drafted, and I've seen a lot of people say that he's not an NFL quarterback. As Tim says, Will Howard will not get drafted, and if he does, it'll be very late, and he won't be in the league post-training camp. So he was a projected 5th-round pick last year at a 60% completion percentage, comes to Ohio State. He's up to the most accurate quarterback in the country, except for Dylan Gabriel. But Dylan Gabriel, much shorter passes. I'm giving it to Will. The most accurate quarterback in the country now. He is without a doubt improved his draft stock. No doubt about it. No doubt about it. And they're guaranteed. If he's drafted in the 3rd round, I wouldn't be shocked. And you get drafted in the 3rd round, you're most likely making a roster, at least for a couple seasons, if they invest a 3rd rounder in you. BC likes when Auburn is good. I love when Auburn is good. I've always rooted for Auburn in the Iron Bowl because they're the perpetual underdog, right? You're in a state with Alabama, for crying out loud. And they're kind of the podunk school, the one in the state that's looked down upon. And you got a lot of them like that, like Texas and Texas A&M. The University of Texas looks down on the A&Ms, and Washington looks down on Oregon. Michigan tries to look down on Ohio State. You know how it goes. So I'm always on the blue collar guys' side. That's the way I lean. Anyway, let's go over these schools and these potential playoff matchups. How do the Buckeyes match up with these playoff teams right now as they currently stand? Number 1, Oregon. Obviously, I think if we're looking at who's going to be your top 3 toughest matchups, Oregon definitely is going to be in my top 3. We've already seen it. We know how it went. It's a game, in my opinion, that we can win or lose. And if we played it 10 times, it would probably be 5-5. Some glaring mistakes in that game. I think that we're going to get fixed. Obviously, the defense. We're going to make sure we get lined up that second time. If we have a rematch, we're going to be in our stances. That generally helps to play defense, to be ready for the play. Number two, when your guys get tired, you're going to take them out of the game. I think they'll do that. In the secondary, they're going to need to change things up, right? But Oregon going to be in the top 3 scariest matchups. How about Texas? Texas, the number 3 ranked team in the country. They got a really good passing game, a quarterback who makes really good decisions. I think they're pretty good. I think they're a little overrated. I think it's an offense that would put up quite a few yards on Ohio State. I think they would definitely put up some points. I don't think they could run the ball well against us. They got a pretty good offensive line, but an offensive line that got absolutely destroyed by Georgia. Now, Ohio State doesn't have Michael Williams or Jalen Carter. Sadly, Jalen Carter ranked right behind C.J. Hicks in the linebacker rankings. That would be really nice. But they use Jalen Carter as a real weapon. One of those types of positions I'm talking about. Can Ohio State try to duplicate what Georgia did to Texas? I don't know. Is Texas a top 3 scariest player in here? I don't think so. I'm not too scared of them. These guys gave up 30 points to Georgia, 27 to Vanderbilt. I think the Buckeyes can score with them. We'll see, get a better feel probably after they play Texas A&M. That Texas A&M offense is pretty putrid, though. So I don't know, but I'm not too scared of them. I'm amazed that their first year in the SEC, they've gotten the schedule that they've gotten. Mississippi State, horrible Oklahoma, Georgia, Vanderbilt, Florida, Arkansas, Kentucky, and Texas A&M. That's like the crap of the crap mixed in with Georgia. But I like Ohio State against Texas. I don't know, 7 out of 10 games. Number 5, Penn State. I definitely like Ohio State in a rematch. Number 6, Indiana. Absolutely like Ohio State. And we're going to see that in, 8 days, 9 days? Number 7, BYU. Come on, man. Yeah, no doubt. BYU, the Big 12 champ, like I said, they're rarely going to be a team that we're ever going to look at before the game and say, that's a team that's going to compete with a Notre Dame. Notre Dame's next on my notes, sorry. With an Ohio State, with an Alabama, with a Georgia, with the Tennessee. I just can't see it happening. But if it does, it'll be fun as hell, right? Notre Dame. Honestly, I thought Ohio State would beat the brakes off Notre Dame last year. They did not, but I think something was off with that Ohio State team last year. I love the matchup against this Notre Dame team. And the reason why is I think you need a good quarterback to beat this Ohio State team. If you don't have a good quarterback, you are simply scratched off the list immediately. You can't beat this Buckeye team without a good quarterback. And Riley Leonard is just not good enough of a quarterback. He's just not. He's too one-dimensional. Number 9, Alabama. Number 10, who else number 10? Oh, 9, Miami. 10, Bama. 11, Ole Miss. 12, Georgia. This is the tier that scares me the most. Miami, not so much. I just don't feel like Miami can do a ton against Ohio State. Cam Ward will put up some points, but defensively, I think the Buckeyes shred them. Alabama. This to me is the number 1 scariest team. And the reason is because when Jalen is running the ball and he is committed to running the ball, he's better than anybody else in the country. He's so dynamic. And there's times when he wants to be a traditional quarterback, and I feel like he tries too hard to shake the stigma of being a great runner. He just wants to prove it, and I get it. He's trying to set himself up for an NFL career. But when you get into the playoffs, it's win at all costs. And he's going to be trying to play like he played at LSU, which was absolutely unbelievable. I mean, it looked borderline unstoppable. It was the scariest team by far that I've seen all year. That offense right there with him running like that, 15 carries for 185 yards. And we know that he is number 1, like the best quarterback in the country at the home run ball, with a wide receiver who is, some say, almost as good as Jeremiah Smith, which is ridiculous, but he's really damn good. Georgia. I would not feel complete if this season doesn't go through Georgia at some point. I don't believe the makeup of this team is good. I don't think they've got heart. I don't think they can answer the bell. I don't think Kirby has them on a leash like he usually does. I think their quarterback sucks. And the ironic thing is, coming into the season, that was the reason Georgia was number 1 and Ohio State was number 2, because Georgia had a proven quality quarterback and Ohio State brought in a transfer that sucked. So how's it look now? As Will Howard sits as the most accurate quarterback in college football, the quarterback of the Ohio State Buckeyes, and Carson Beck is, he's damn near falling off draft boards, having a terrible season. I almost feel bad for the guy. He's getting so much crap down there. But I want revenge. I want revenge against Georgia, and that's a team that I want to go through. I'll be very disappointed if we don't get them in the draw somehow. I want to see them. I really, really want to. I'm so sick of it. They've talked so much crap and been so dismissive of not just Ohio State, but the entire Big Ten since that game that they won by 1 flipping point. They've been so dismissive, so arrogant. I want that team bad. Shout out to the Dog fans. I want you. Ole Miss. Is the quarterback good enough? Hell yes, he is. Jackson Dart just threw for 506 touchdowns a couple weeks ago. Trey Harris, one of the top 3 wide receivers in college football. The defensive line, man, oh man, 2 of the best in the country. They create havoc. Ole Miss, Alabama, Oregon. Those are the top 3 matchups that I think would give us the most difficult test. And of those teams, I think they're all 5 out of 10. If they bring their best and Ohio State brings their best, you're flipping a coin. It's just it's going to be one on the margins. That's just how I feel about it. So who do you guys think the top 3 matchups that the guys you would maybe you would like to face them anyway? These are the 3 toughest matchups. The 3 toughest matchups for the Buckeyes to me: Oregon, Alabama, Ole Miss. But let's talk about the recency bias, right? We've just seen Ole Miss have an amazing performance against Georgia. They looked fantastic. They looked fantastic the week before against Arkansas. That's the game Jackson Dart threw for 506 touchdowns. But we just saw that, and we just saw Alabama destroy LSU. Okay. We've also seen that same Ole Miss team lose to Kentucky. We've seen that same Alabama team lose to Vanderbilt. We've seen that same Alabama team lose to Tennessee. But we just saw them be really good. So now all of a sudden, they're the best again, right? They're best that they are. And you don't know what team you're going to get. Ohio State been fairly consistent all year. So it's a matter of, can they bring their best? I think Ohio State can. Are those teams going to bring their best? I think they're more inconsistent than the Buckeyes. So ultimately, if we're reseeding this bracket, or doing the odds, like the Buckeyes to me are once again the favorite to win the national championship. And as we look through the updated odds, they're without a doubt the favorite to win the national championship at plus 300, Oregon plus 420, Texas plus 450, Alabama plus 850 at number 4. We got to weigh when we pick these guys. Like, I don't mind if somebody else, the matchup I want least, Alabama. I wouldn't mind if somebody else took them out. But these tough matchups, I almost want to get them. Like, I want this Buckeye team to win through the hardest road possible. But if you were to say who is the easiest road possible, I would say Boise, Penn State, Notre Dame, and BYU. Be tough to get a draw like that. But I think that we're going to find, I don't know, in the next couple of seasons where we go through this playoff, that we'll have a few champions that end up getting a super lucky draw and kind of going through a real easy road, because going through a couple of these teams would be difficult. And the way it's seeded, when you look at some of these 2-loss teams in the back, like, it's the final 4 teams that 2 of my toughest matchups come from. they're on the back end. And in the middle, you've got Indiana, BYU, Tennessee, and Notre Dame. That's the middle tier. If you split this up into 3 tiers, these 12 teams, the middle tier, that's the soft underbelly. It's the back end and the top end that are the tough ones. So I think you are going to have some times where we see the champion just end up getting a really easy walk through this tournament. All right, I got to make an apology. Where's my man's here? Let me pull this up. I felt so terrible when I saw this yesterday, guys. All right, my man, Robert Rogers, too. Robert, Chuck, I like the show, but weeks ago, I paid for a $5 super chat, and you never read it. Robert, I am so sorry, buddy. I appreciate you so much for the super chat, for liking the show, and I want to make it up to you. So, to make it up to my man, Robert, who I'm incredibly sorry to, the next person that sends, listen, I got these shirts. Really nice Juck Eyes shirts. It's a cotton poly blend, and I got a lot of them. They're excellent. The next person that sends a super chat, only be one, any nomination, $1.99, whatever. The next person that sends one, I am going to send you one of those Juck on Buck shirts to make up for shunning Robert and not reading his comment. Robert, I'm incredibly sorry. We're going to make it up to you right now, buddy. Whoever sends that next super chat, any amount of money, they're going to get a shirt thanks to Robert and me shunning him on his super chat. Of course, I'm kidding, Robert. Please send me an email, buddy. I got something for you. Buddy. juckonbucks@gmail. I'm very sorry. Thank you for the super chat. All right, guys. I've got a busy day. We're going to go through a couple of comments here, and then I am going to DeMarcus Carter. DeMarcus wins Juck Eyes shirt number 2. So Robert and DeMarcus, thank you very much. It is juckonbucks@gmail. Send me the email with your size and your address, and I will transfer that information over to Columbus Apparel to get you a shirt, my man. Appreciate you. And of course, our buddy Robert. I'm Leaving says, we'll find out a lot more about Ohio State when they play Oregon and Indy. How would that line hold up versus one of the best defensive lines in the country? And you make a great point, right? We didn't have to see Jordan Birch round 1. It's going to be really interesting now. Really interesting to see them against Jordan Birch with the retooled offensive line. I want to say, I'm really interested in the way Ryan Day keeps talking about Donovan out there at tackle. Keeps talking like, man, he really feels like he could have been a real deal tackle, which is really interesting. David Smith says Ryan Day bursting under situational pressure is a concern, and it's going to be, right? It's going to be until he kind of shows us he can do that maybe 2 times in a row. It's going to be. I'm ready to see it. I still don't feel 100% comfortable with him late in games. JJ still thinks that Oregon is better than Ohio State. It's a fair point. Terry Slusher says, Heather Dinich of ESPN said she thinks Georgia should get in even if they lose to Tennessee, but said the loss to Oregon hurts the Buckeyes' chances. That's interesting. She's from Pennsylvania. I believe she went to Penn State, and used to, right? I guess when you're at ESPN long enough, things change. But she used to generally be relatively fair when it comes to the Big Ten SEC argument stuff. Terry thinks that Georgia is going to get beat by Tennessee on Saturday. Interesting question brought up yesterday. I saw, does Tennessee actually benefit if Nico isn't allowed to play? If Nico's in the concussion protocol and he can't play, Tennessee loses the game. And now you've got that second loss on Tennessee's record, but you got the asterisk. Nico couldn't play. He was in the concussion protocol. I think it depends how much they lose by, but it's potentially true. However, there is no way in hell that Tennessee wants to take an L against Georgia, because don't forget, they've still got to play Vanderbilt, which is a game now that you could potentially lose. And it's Georgia and Tennessee. Like that, they want to win that game. They want to win that game, man. Coaches do not think like this. Players don't think like this. Fans think like this, but I've seen that floating around a lot. Daniel thinks Oregon and Alabama are bad matchups for the Buckeyes. So Alabama with the excellent deep balls, Oregon with the excellent deep balls, add in a couple of running quarterbacks, which I think are always just tough to deal with, no matter what the team. But when you talk about Milroe's insane running ability, yeah, I agree with you. Andrew says a loss is a loss. No Nico, no care. I honestly, we've seen that the committee does care. If you don't have your starting quarterback, they tend to give you a pass. Eric Biddle says Edric Houston should get more snaps on the edge. He's our future and going to be a great one. Moved him to 3 tech, but yeah, I agree. I like him getting more snaps for sure. Jeff Johnson says Dinich is the same as Auerbach. Auerbach, really bad. A Michigan graduate, so no surprise there. Jay Buck, here's an interesting one. Jay Buck would like to see Bryson Rodgers get a couple of catches this week. Super fast, better on his routes, and he absolutely is. Incredible route runner. Really fast, good hands. That's been a real surprise. That was not one of Heartline's big-time recruits. But when I watch him, the film is the practice film, like, wow. And he does streams where he streams, inside practice footage on his YouTube channel. Man, just watching him and watching the other wide receivers, line up and run routes in shorts and a t-shirt. Yeah, you can see the twitch, the speed, the crispness in his routes. Really, really good. Seems to have a really good attitude too, since coming back. Daniel says Ohio State has been letting quarterbacks look like Mike Vick all year. Milroe scrambling on us could get scary. It's definitely a fear for me, but I think that everybody who plays them is going to be scared to death after seeing what he just did to LSU. Not that LSU's some awesome defense. They're not. They're not nearly as talented as Ohio State's defense. But boy, there were some of those plays. You're just like, I don't know what stops that. They had him spied with a really good player. I don't know what stops that. So that sucks. But at the same time, I like Ohio State against anybody. I think they're the odds-on favorite for a reason. So, all right, my friends, we're at 53-53. I appreciate you so much for joining me. Tomorrow will be a Juck and Chris Friday, and Chris and I will go over the weekend's games, talk a little more about Ohio State, talk about Ryan Day's missed opportunity on Tuesday, which I was thinking about last night. Man, he just missed one. Hey, here's a good one from BC. Put Caleb on Miller as a spy. I trust that. Is there anybody in college football that you would trust more? Nobody. It's a great point. It's an absolute great point. So, and one more. Mika wants Jameer. Jameer Brown, Teddy Ginn 2.0. That would be fantastic. And things are looking really, really good. Thank you all so much. Thank you, Doreen. Thank you, Coconut. Appreciate you guys. Bradley, Big E, Jeff. Thanks, guys. Have a great day. We will see you guys tomorrow. Juck on Bucks out. Hey, it's Juck.
Juck? Who is Juck?
Juck on Bucks.
Juck on Bucks. Juck on Bucks?
Juck.
Juck.
Juck on Bucks.
My guy, Juck.
Juck on Bucks.
My buddy Juck.
Juck is the Juck.
It's Juck on Bucks.
Okay.
Juck is junk.
The Juck Eyes. The Juck
All his
Eyes.
fans.
Juck on Bucks.
Junk. Juck. Not junk. Juck.